On September 7, 2016, my dad was in a motorcycle accident in Harrison, Ohio around 5:30 p.m. At this time, I was all the way out in Milan, Indiana playing a soccer game. I got home after the game around 8, 9 o'clock, and my grandma was there to watch my sister at the house, so I knew something was up. She told me that my mom wanted me to call her as soon as I got home. So I called my mom, and I said, "Mom, what's going on?" She said, "Alleya, your dad has been in an accident today." There was a brief moment of silence for me to gather my thoughts, and then it hit me. My dad took the motorcycle to work today. I fell to the floor crying. A million thoughts ran through my head. I had no idea what to say or how to say anything, but finally I managed to mutter out, "Mom, is he okay?" At that point, we had no idea. He was still being scanned, he was being x-rayed, we had no idea what was going on. An hour later, she called me back and she said, "The doctor just diagnosed your dad with a severe concussion and will be home in an hour." A couple weeks later, he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and could not remember most of the accident. Later down the road, he eventually remembered everything from the accident and told us the full story. In my last speech, I told you all a story about a man who was driving home from work on a motorcycle and was in an accident. When the collision happened, he went over the handlebars, he was airborne for 20 feet, and landed on his back. This story was about my dad. This accident happened because a man was not paying attention to the motorcycles on the road. He pulled out in front of my dad because he was not aware of the motorcycles on the road. Accidents like these are the exact reason awareness must be raised in order for the uneducated public to make a difference in driving behaviors and to reduce the risk of accidents and fatalities involving motorcyclists. What most of you tend to believe is the reason for the increase of motorcycle accidents and fatalities is because of how simple it is to get your permit. You believe that anybody can just go up to the BMV, take the test, and pass. You believe that anybody can ride a motorcycle. And you believe that riding a bike is the same thing as riding a motorcycle. Now you may think that anybody can just go up to the BMV, take this test, and pass, which you might be right if you're extremely lucky. But if you don't know the first thing about riding a motorcycle and how to drive in the presence of a motorcycle, you're not going to pass any test. Take it from my dad. He's been riding ever since he was 15 years old, which now adds up to about 31 years. He's had his motorcycle license in 3 states now: Kentucky, Virginia, and Indiana. He said, "Kentucky and Virginia were probably the easiest motorcycle permit tests that you will ever take. Maybe not so much now because I took them in the 80s and 90s. But when I took the Indiana test back in 2013, I didn't pass the first or the second time. And I even studied and I bought books from Amazon. But I still failed that Indiana test, and that was just the written test to get my permit." When I asked him why the Indiana test was so hard, he responded with, "There's not a whole lot of questions on you actually just riding a motorcycle. It's about you as a driver and how you drive in the presence of one." He said this makes this really hard because everyone thinks they know how to drive until they're tested on it. Not everyone can just hop on a motorcycle and take off. Unless you know how to drive a manual, you're not going to make it out of the parking lot, and that's a fact. Also, bikes and motorcycles are not the same thing. Bikes weigh on average of 15 pounds. An average motorcycle weighs anywhere between 540 pounds to 905 pounds. Now, many of you may still think that just because you know how to ride a bike, you know how to ride a motorcycle. But if you do not know how to drive a manual, and you don't know how to drive around a motorcycle as a driver, or even hold up and control 540 pounds of metal, you're not going to pass any test, nor are you going to make it out anywhere driving that manual. For my entire life and before I was born, my family has had a great influence of motorcycles in our lives. As I said before, my dad has been driving a motorcycle ever since he was 15 years old, which now adds up to about 31 years, give or take. But some of you haven't had this luxury in your life. So I want each and every one of you to put yourself in my position. You coming home from a normal, everyday life, only to find out that your dad has been in a severe motorcycle accident. Calling your mom not knowing if your dad is going to be okay or not. And being only 17 at the time and not knowing if your dad is ever going to come home again. All of this can be prevented if one of you in this room was just a little bit more educated and a little bit more aware of the motorcycles on the road. So please, do yourself and your community the favor of watching videos, taking driver safety courses, and reading informational articles on how to become a better, safer, more aware driver. And look twice and save a life. Thank you. Yes?
think that all drivers, like even when we're getting our permits, do you think we should have to take like an awareness test for not only like vehicles but other dangers that could be out there, like people?
I believe so. Since a motorcycle is very exposed and they're small, like normal, like everyday life eyes are not going to pick up on something like that. Like there's sometimes you're driving home at night and you're not going to pick up on a deer that's over in a field. So you train your eyes to look for those deers and look for those warning signs. So that's the point that I'm trying to make. Like train your eyes to look for those motorcycles.
Do you feel like you're more aware of like motorcycles because of like your family and it's been in your family versus somebody that hasn't been around that other lives?
I do believe that because I've been exposed to it my whole life. Like I said, my dad has drove ever since he was little, so it's been a part of my everyday life.
All right, thank you.